Thank you, President Milei. Thank you very much for talking to Bloomberg again. Last year, I think we discussed free market economics, dogs and the Rolling Stones, but this time we are going to begin with Venezuela. You welcomed the removal of President Maduro, but the Trump administration seems quite happy at the moment with sticking with Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who is loyal to Maduro. And you very much described the Maduro regime as a narco-terrorist dictatorship. So what has changed? Are you worried that nothing has changed in Venezuela?
No, no es así como lo
no, it's not that way. First of all, I would like to recognize the tremendous work done by President Trump and Marco Rubio. First, in order to extract the narco-tyrant, dictator, murderer, Maduro,
que además se dedicaba a propagar el
also
terrorismo
made a
por
point of spreading terrorism
toda la región,
across the whole region,
financiando campañas,
funding campaigns and
actos terroristas,
financing terrorist acts out on the streets, complicating lives for all governments that were not pro-21st century socialism. So I warmly welcome that situation. On the other hand, I think the plan designed by the US administration in 3 phases is quite appropriate. The first one has to do with stabilization, which is the current phase. Then will come the reconstruction, and then the transition towards democracy. The thing is, it wouldn't be possible to do it otherwise. You know, stabilization needs to be done this way.
Que estamos en América y que hemos
Our
sufrido
countries
y
in the
que todavía
Americas
seguimos
that have
padeciendo
suffered and
la
continue
intromisión
to suffer
de las huestes del
the
siglo del socialismo del
encroachment
siglo
of the
XXI en la
hosts of
estructura
21st century
del
socialism
Estado,
on
digamos,
the
que
structures
trabajan
of the
como
state. You see,
básicamente
they
policía del
basically
pensamiento
work
durante
as if they
gestiones del
were
socialismo
thought
del siglo
police,
XXI.
you know, under 21st
Actúan como
century
espías
socialism
cuando están fuera del poder, alguien del signo
administrations.
de
And
ellos,
when they're
y
not
que se
in
dedican
government,
a
they act as
sabotear
spies, and they
a
make a
gobiernos
point
de
of
signos
sabotaging
distintos.
governments
Es muy
that
difícil,
are not
digamos, si usted
that do not
piensa
belong
eso
to
en
the ranks. It's
Venezuela,
very
eso sería
difficult. You see,
100%.
in Venezuela,
Con
that
lo
would be
cual,
the
digamos,
case,
creer que
100%. So,
existe otra posibilidad,
thinking that there could be another possible way of managing the stabilization process truly means not understanding the limits of reality as such. So, in my view, the work being done by the United States is excellent. And besides, I think it is working. It's bearing fruit because we see that also political prisoners are being released, something we welcome. And we also hope they will finally release all of the political prisoners. We are particularly concerned about the situation of Nahuel Gallo from Argentina, but as we see the positive evolution of the situation, we are hopeful that Nahuel will be able to be with us again in Argentina.
You know the reason why I asked. You flew to Oslo to support Maria Corina Machado when she won the Peace Prize. And do you still support her to be, or her candidate, Edmundo González, to be the president of Venezuela?
A ver, la situación es que lo que hay que
the thing we need to understand is that over the course of the stabilization process, any alternative,
la propia fuerza del régimen,
actually the force of the regime indoors will make anything fail otherwise. So the way I see it, the approach taken by the United States to deal with the situation is the right thing to do, the right way to go at this time. And, well, when it comes to rebuilding for democratic transition, it'll be the time to make perhaps other decisions and see how progress can be made towards democratization in Venezuela. I mean, of course, I do greatly appreciate and I'm fond of Maria Corina, who's a great friend and defender of liberty, but we need for this process to be successful. We shouldn't be too hasty and, as a result, finally going backwards.
And you still talk with Machado, and you're still in contact with her?
Sí, yo estoy en contacto con
Oh,
ella.
yes, I'm in contact with her. We are friends.
Let's look at the economy. When we came here last year, you had already brought inflation down from 300% to 80%. Now it's at 30%. You've had a good year in terms of the trade deficit. The economy's growing. There are two questions, though, always come back. And the first is the currency. As you know, you are a free marketeer. You believe in free currencies. And the question is, when will you let the peso go free? And just to be really clear, the peso going free, you have broadened the band, but a free currency, you know as well as I do, means without any controls or FX bans. When does that going to happen?
Bueno, lo primero que hay que
Well,
entender
the first thing we need to understand is that
tiene que manejar
when you come into office and need to run a country, it's not that you start from
o
scratch.
sea, usted tiene que enfrentar una
You need
historia y
to
Argentina tiene,
obviously face history, and
muy mal.
Argentina bears a very bad history on its shoulders. Argentina has removed 13 zeros from its currency. It has had 3 hyperinflations without a war. So there is a primary problem regarding the currency in Argentina,
y es el mecanismo
and
por el
that
cual
is the
los
mechanism
agentes
by
forman
which
expectativas.
economic
Si uno,
agents,
digamos, trabajar con
form
un modelo de
expectations. If
expectativas
we
racionales,
were to work
tradicional,
with a
todos
traditional
hemos
rational
estudiado
expectations
y
model, like the
tanto
one we've all
festejado a
studied,
Robert Lucas Jr.
we
por
have so
tratar
much
de
celebrated Robert Lucas Jr. Well, so much so, you know, I've named 2 of my 4-legged children after him.
Digamos, así que, digamos, se
So
imaginará que,
you can imagine.
digamos, no es algo que,
Do they bark at
que
you
me
every day that
que
you
me
do
sale.
not set the currency free?
No, digamos, o sea, no los he visto todavía ladrar por
I
eso.
haven't heard them bark because of that.
Digo, porque además tengo
at least.
versiones mías
And
muchísimo más
besides, I
liberales.
have even much more liberal, libertarian
Lo que quiero
versions of me.
señalar es que en un-
But I would like to
en
note that
contextos normales de presión y temperatura,
under normal
digamos, el
pressure
nivel de
and
precios en la
temperature
economía
conditions, so to
estaría
speak, the price
regido
level in
por
the
la cantidad de
economy
dinero.
would be governed
tipo de
by
cambio es un
the
precio más de la
money
economía.
amount. And the
En
exchange
estricto
rate is
rigor,
one more
nosotros
price in the
hemos
economy.
fijado
Strictly
la cantidad
speaking,
de dinero
we have
a
set
mediados
the
del año
money
pasado,
amount. This
perdón, a
was
mediados del 24. Es decir, y
in
lo que estamos padeciendo
mid-2024.
ahora son los
And
efectos
what
de los
we
rezagos de la
are getting to
política
feel now is
monetaria,
the
digamos, del desastre monetario
effect,
que hizo
the
el gobierno
hangover
anterior, que
effect
emitió
after the
28
monetary
puntos del
disaster of the
PBI,
previous administration,
digamos,
which
13 en el
printed
último
money
año para tratar de
in
ganar la
an
elección.
amount equivalent to
Entonces,
28%
lo que sucede
of
es que en
GDP,
Argentina,
and all the
la
more so during
historia,
the last few
y
months
esto en
before they left
teoría
office to
económica
win the
es el
election.
efecto
You know,
Trump-Cantillon, es la secuencia
this
que van tomando
is
los
the
precios.
sort of sequence
Pongámoslo
that
así, entonces
prices
tiene una
follow
caída de
that I'm
demanda
going to
de
explain.
dinero,
Let's
eso
suppose you
hace
have
caer el tipo
a
de
fall
cambio,
in money demand
eso
that
hace que después
leads to a
suban los
leap in the
precios de los
exchange rate, and
transables,
that
después
leads
suben
to
los
an
precios
increase in the price of
mayoristas,
tradables,
después
then in
lo hacen los precios
wholesale
minoristas, y
prices,
por
then
último los
retail
altos.
prices,
Es decir, si usted
and
lleva,
then wages, of
digamos,
course.
cerca de 90 años
You
con esa
have
dinámica,
spent
y
almost
bueno, es muy
90 years
probable
with
que la
that sort of
gente,
dynamic.
digamos,
It's quite
crea que
likely
si
that
salta el
people
tipo
will
de
think
cambio,
that if the
van a
exchange
saltar los
rate
precios.
goes up, then the prices
Entonces,
will go
yo no
up
me voy a
too.
enojar con
So I won't
la forma en la
get
cual las personas
angry
forman las expectativas,
because of the
porque
way
la verdad es que
people
tienen 90
form
años que
their
tuvieron
expectations,
razón.
because, I mean, they've
Entonces,
been
en ese
proven right
sentido,
for 90 years.
digamos, lo que
So,
nosotros tratamos de hacer es
what we are
entender
trying to
que
do
la
is
gente puede formar expectativas de
to
esa manera,
understand that
y
people can
entendemos
build
que
expectations
volatilidad
that
en el
way,
tipo de
and we
cambio
understand
puede
that
terminar traduciendo
volatility in the
en
exchange
volatilidad en
rate
el
can
nivel de precios.
translate
Porque
into
supongamos
price
lo siguiente,
volatility.
usted tiene un cambio
Let's
de
suppose
precios
you
relativos, o sea,
have a
donde
change in
los
relative
transables se
prices
vuelven
and
más caros.
tradables
Si
become
usted,
more
digamos,
expensive.
o un deterioro en los términos de
Or
intercambio, le salta el
perhaps
tipo
there is
de
a
cambio,
deterioration
digamos,
in the terms
¿qué es lo
of
que va a
trade,
pasar? Entonces,
and the exchange rate goes
usted
up.
ahí
What will
que
happen
le van
then?
a saltar los precios, entonces
Prices
le
will
va a
go
quedar
up.
desacomodado el nivel de
So
precios con
you
la
will
cantidad de
see
dinero y
a
usted va a
mismatch
meter a la
between the
economía
price
en una
level
recesión.
and the money amount, and the
Entonces
economy
nosotros
will
entendemos ese problema de la
slide into
volatilidad.
recession. We understand
Entonces,
the
el
problem
tipo de
of
cambio dentro de
volatility.
la
So
banda
the
es
exchange
libre,
rate within the
es libre,
band
dentro
is free. It
de
is
la banda
free.
es libre.
Within the band, it
Y
is
las
free.
bandas
And
solamente
the
tienen
bands
como función
only serve the purpose
mostrarle a la gente,
of
digamos, que el tipo de cambio
showing
no va a
to
valer
the
cualquier
people
cosa.
that
Y
the
de esa
exchange
manera
rate
aprenden a flotar.
will
Es
not
decir, se van
be
sacando el
just
miedo a
any
flotar.
exchange rate. So then
Entonces,
they learn how
ese es
to
el rol
float
que tienen las
and
bandas,
they lose the
acotar la
fear.
volatilidad.
So
Decir
that's the
que
role
no
of
puede
bands,
pasar
to
cualquier cosa.
limit the volatility.
But when do you think this year you will be able to say you have learnt, you have discovered what that freedom is like? Now try it properly and float. Let's float the peso. What is the timing?
Desde mi punto de vista, ese momento llegará en el
From my
momento en que nosotros
point of
hayamos
view,
determinado de
that
limpiar el
will
sobrante
be
monetario.
when we've finally
nosotros
cleaned up
cargamos
the
con-
money
con
overhang.
sobrante monetario,
We
ya sea
have had
por
this
la-
money
por los
overhang
rezagos de la política
because
monetaria,
of the hangover
cargamos con
of
sobrante
previous
monetario por
monetary
los controles de
policy,
capitales
also
que
due
hubieron,
to the
y
capital
cargamos
controls that
con
were put in
sobrante
place in the
monetario
past,
como
and also
consecuencia
as a
de los
result
controles de precios.
of the price
Dado que
controls.
nosotros hemos fijado la
Since
cantidad de
we
dinero
have
y ahora
set and
solamente
fixed
emitimos
the
contra
money
nueva
amount
demanda,
and we only now
en algún momento
print
la inflación
against
local
new
va a
demand,
terminar
at one point
convergiendo
local
a la
inflation
internacional.
will
En
converge
ese
towards
sentido, quiere
international
decir que en
levels,
ese momento
which
usted
means
limpió
that
el
at
maniobra.
that point you
En
have
ese momento
managed
usted
to
va a
clean
estar
up the
en
money
condiciones de
overhang
flotar
and will be in a
libremente,
position
sin ningún
to let
tipo
the
de
peso
problemas,
float freely
porque en el medio
without
los
any
agentes
sort of
habrán aprendido,
trouble,
y
because
si hay
along the
volatilidad en el
way
tipo de
the
cambio,
agents will have
y
learned.
la
And
quieren
if there's
trasladar
exchange rate
a precios
volatility and they
domésticos,
want to
bueno,
translate that into
tendrán
the
que
domestic
enfrentar
prices,
la
they will
peor cara
have
de
to
Menger, que es
face
no van a tener
Menger's
demanda
worst
y
face. They
van a
will have
limpiar
no
el balance.
demand and will
Can I
have
ask you,
to
the,
deal with
the
it.
other big test, and it's a fairly simple question, is the international loan markets. You have raised money at home, domestically, but as you know very well, when your predecessor defaulted on the foreign bonds, and so the question is very specific. When will you go and raise money in New York or outside Argentina?
A ver, nosotros en rigor,
Well, strictly speaking,
digamos, el tema de conseguir los fondos, la
raising
verdad es que lo único
money,
que nosotros deberíamos necesitar en principio
all we
sería solamente
should
rodear
need
como
would just
marco
be to
general.
roll
¿Por qué?
over as
Porque
a general
Argentina tiene
framework,
déficit
because
cero.
Argentina
De hecho,
has
los
zero
montos que
deficit.
tiene que ver con
In
los
fact, the
intereses,
amount
Argentina lo paga
related
con
to
superávit.
interest
Ese es el
is
primer
paid
punto.
by
Por otra
Argentina
parte, a
out of
partir de la ley de
surplus. That's the
licencia
first point.
fiscal,
And
nosotros
through the
estamos esperando
Tax Innocence
potenciar
Act,
y
we
dar
hope
crecimiento,
to really boost
¿sí?
and
digamos, al mercado de capitales
develop
doméstico.
the domestic
Consecuentemente,
capital market.
la necesidad que
Therefore,
nosotros vamos a tener de tener que
our
recurrir
need
a
to
fondos en los
resort
mercados
to
externos cada
funds
vez va a ser
in
menor.
foreign
En el-
markets
no sé,
will
en el peor de los
be
casos,
less and less.
digamos,
In the
lo único que
worst
estaríamos
of
yendo a
cases,
buscar en los
perhaps we would
mercados
only be
internacionales
going out to
es
international markets
básicamente el
to
rollover. Y esto,
secure the
digamos,
rollover.
nosotros lo
And
así porque además, dadas las
besides,
fundamentals que tiene
given
Argentina, nos parece
Argentina's
que también
fundamentals,
pagar
we think that
una sobretasa, un riesgo país de
paying
15%
a surplus
nos
rate
parece
or
que no está
with country risk at
claramente
550
alineado
basis
con,
points, we think that is clearly not
nuestros
in line
fundamentals. Por lo
with
tanto,
our fundamentals.
dado
So,
que nosotros
since
digamos, una muy baja relación deuda-producto.
we have a very low debt to GDP ratio because most of the debt is within the public sector, and we have achieved fiscal equilibrium, we will need less and less access to capital markets aside from the rollover. And with the development of the local market, we'll be able to pay and bring down the exposure. It's not something that, given our fiscal performance, should be a great concern. I would be worried not to have large enough Argentina.
Last year, you famously got a $20 billion swap line from the US, a big success. When you got it, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said that you had committed to, as he put it, to getting China out of Argentina. And you have always been very critical of China, but as you know, China still has a space station in Argentina. You still have a swap line with China. What does getting China out of Argentina mean to you?
Desde mi punto de vista, el planteo que hizo Scott
In my
Bessent
view,
está en perfecta línea
what
con lo
Scott
que es el
Bessent said is well in line with the thinking of the United States administration, and this is a matter related to geopolitics. The United States does trade with China, and the way we see it, China is a great trading partner. It means a lot of opportunities for us to expand markets. So that is not any source of conflict. When the geopolitical time comes, do you have any doubts as to where Argentina stands?
China doesn't have
no.
a space station in the United States, the last time I checked. It does have a space station in Argentina.
Eso no está probado.
Well, that's not proven.
Well, China doesn't. I will ask President Trump whether the Chinese have a space station there. But in general, you know, when you were a candidate, you were very critical of the Chinese.
A ver, después, vamos a poner estos temas.
Let's put it this way. I'm president for 47.5 million Argentines, and I make the decisions that best favor the interests of the Argentine people. So part of that is the fact that Argentina, which is a very closed country, the most closed country in the world, given its GDP per capita, Argentina should have a trade to GDP ratio of a little over 90%, and it only has 30, strictly speaking 28 if you want to be accurate. Consequently, my plan is to open up to the EU, to EFTA, to the United States, and to China. I want an open economy. And if you look at the weight of the Chinese economy in the world, you will understand that I need to trade with China. Or look at the evolution of India. I need to trade with India. Well, and that's what I'm working on, to make Argentina definitely a more open country.
On the subject of trade agreements, you have a trade agreement with the US. When do you expect that to be signed?
We are ready to sign. We are working on the fine detail. We will have good news soon.
And the other one is Mercosur, which I remember you were somewhat critical of, but that is the Southern American trading bloc, which I know you think could be even freer than it is, but it's just done a deal with the European Union, which I think you support. But do you worry about the effect that could have on Argentine industry, or when it opens up the field with Europe?
When you design policy, and that was the central pillar of my presentation yesterday, my address in Davos. You see, you design based on ethical and moral values. So please explain to me why you would justify a situation where Argentines, or most Argentines, need to pay more for goods they could get more cheaply, because it's false that also destroys jobs. That's one of the big lies of Keynesian economists, who are actually ruining the whole planet. Whatever they touch, they break. But when you open up the economy, there are products that will be cheaper, and you might lose jobs here, but that lets individuals spend less money. For example, in Argentina, you used to pay $40 for a T-shirt when it's actually only $5. And the money you save, you will spend elsewhere in another sector. You will create jobs in another economic sector that people are interested in, and this will lead to high productivity. So when you open up the economy, you will see a reallocation of resources, but there will be productivity gains due to greater division of labor and higher specialization. Otherwise, if the protectionist argument were true, one day we would decide to close up Argentina. I will borrow an example from my brilliant, excellent, wonderful deregulation minister. That's taken from one of his books. I used to read him. I used to always be a big fan of Federico Sturzenegger. So he said, okay, so let's close up Argentina, and then narrow it to the province of Buenos Aires, and then further down to the city of Buenos Aires, and then to Palermo, which is just one district, and then it will be just a couple of blocks. And the end result of this will be full autarky. You will live all by yourself. What will your life be like? Miserable, because you'll have to make your own shoes, your own socks, your own suits, your own ties, your own shirts. How do you think you're going to live? badly. So trade creates a division of labor that leads to increasing returns, leads to productivity gains, and to well-being. This is why more open countries are wealthier. And Argentina is the most closed country, so we have a lot to do.
That was a very eloquent defense of free trade, which I should point out not enough other people do. But next door to you, you have Brazil, where I think it'd be fair to say there is a much more Keynesian approach with your friend, or not that friend, President Lula. He's up for election this year. What mending that relationship with Brazil, is that a priority, or do your dogs just bark every time you mention him? Are you going to call one of your dogs Lula?
Jamás le daría el nombre.
I would never call my dog anything left-wing. I really love my dogs too much as to insult them. This is why they have all been named after liberal economists. Murray Rothbard, Milton, for Milton Friedman, Robert for Robert Lucas Jr., and Robert again for Robert Lucas Jr., and Conan, which is the barbarian warrior. That's the original dog. But apart from that, we have an adult relationship. I mean, this is not some kind of ideological or paper-based battle. In the middle, we have the lives of millions of human beings. So we continue to advance, but we have really given a lot of a boost to Mercosur for it to be more flexible and dynamic. Signing the deal with the EU took 25 years' time. That's a very long time. And the world of today needs more speed. It needs to move faster. So this is why we have also encouraged working with a lot more flexibility. We need to adapt. This is not a matter of whatever suits the bureaucrats. You know, those who just take up seat space and collect tons of dollars in order to do nothing. Because again, for a bureaucrat, the result means nothing, and the process is everything. And people need results. So we work in order to generate results for the people. So whatever helps improve trade, we will do. I will not be breaking anything. Whatever helps gain more trade, I will do. And if other countries decide to take other decisions, well, they're sovereign. It's up to them to do whatever they please. I work for the well-being of the 47.5 million Argentines.
You look at Latin America. When we first met, you know, you were a sole voice on the right, if we call it that way. Since then, you've had Chile.
I was more lonely than Adam on Mother's Day. Now I have quite a few friends.
Yes, that's a very good parallel. Chile and since then, Chile and Bolivia. You have two friends.
And then Cain, of course, was,
yes. But then you have Chile and Bolivia. And now we do have elections in Colombia and Brazil. Have you identified people there who you want to support to carry on the same kind of wave of reforms that you would hope to see change in Latin America?
La decisión de cada pueblo,
the decision is up to every people to decide whether they want to follow the path of socialism. You know, Thomas Sowell said, you know what is the best thing about socialism? That it sounds nice, but you know what the problem is? It always fails. So each society will awaken to the light of the ideas of freedom whenever it can. And I'm optimistic that they will become aware that the best thing they can do is espouse the ideas of freedom. And we can exemplify this with Argentina. We had inflation increasing 1% a day, so we were headed to 17,000%. We halted fiscal deficit, which was 5% of GDP in the Treasury. We halted that in the first month. It would have seemed impossible, but it was not impossible for the world's best economy minister, Toto Caputo, and the best minister we've ever had in our history. In only 6 months' time, we fixed the quasi-fiscal deficit, and we also stopped the money amount, the printing money. Now we are looking at 24, 25, depending on whether you take the wholesale rates. So everyone was predicting a hyper recession, but Argentina reached a floor in April and then started to grow strongly. The latest figures show the economy growing at 4.2%. We have lifted 30% of the population out of poverty. 15 million people have been lifted out of poverty. What does this mean? That the free market works, that free market capitalism works, because those are the fundamentals I referred to yesterday in my Davos address. Free enterprise capitalism is not only just and efficient, but it also lets the economy grow more. And when you design policies on the basis of ethical and moral values, the Western values, you thrive, and you also enjoy social consensus because you're doing what is just, what is fair. One of the things is that
matar la justicia en
you
el altar de la
can't
eficiencia,
possibly
ya
kill
sea la
justice on the
eficiencia
altar of
paretiana,
efficiency, whether it be Pareto efficiency or the efficiency of Machiavelli's political calculus. This is why I said yesterday that Machiavelli is dead and we need to bury him, because what we are proving is that when you design policies on the basis of ethical and moral values, and when you do what is just, not what best suits the political rubbish people who work only on the basis of political speculation, that's how you gain support. We got 41% of the vote, a 17% lead over Kirchnerism, which in a general presidential election would mean winning on the first round. And the latest surveys show that 62% of Argentines support free market economy. And you know what? It works, and it is only just.
President Milei, there are many things that you can defeat, but one of them, perhaps the most socialist things of all, is time, and we have sadly run out of it. Thank you very, very much for talking to us. Please, can you all, we have to get President Milei out very quickly, so can you stay in your seats, and then we will go out. Thank you.
Pero para mí es un placer.
Gracias.